3, 2, 1, end of test. King with a go.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. And what happens when you tell our crew of snappy chappy guys here that you like to go to Vegas and roll the dice? This hat happens. That's what happens. You can say the word. I can't say it on YouTube because they might kick me off or beat me or whatever, but it rhymes with snaps. So when you go to Vegas and you do that, they get you this little interesting headgear. You know, honestly, you have to be a good sport about this. I've lived through this agreement since COVID. The hats have gotten wackier. I've been encased by a fish and whatever, but this one here is pushing the boundary. My Giglamug assistant. Now we got Kevin and we've got Greg involved now. Kevin is helping out Greg, and so both these guys are laughing their rear ends off here, but we're going to go ahead and toss this off camera. Good catch. So now what we're talking about here, and this is the last of the viewer suggested aircraft. This is the Northrop Grumman, the RQ-4, the Global Hawk. Now you can see, and I'll let Greg throw up a plan view of this this bad boy. Look at the wingspan on this thing. The wingspan on this thing is just absolutely nuts. And I will tell you, the model does no justice to how big this airplane really is. It is roughly about the size of a C-130 dimensionally, not the fuselage, but in the front to back and side to side. It is a very, very large airframe. Now, first flight was in 1998. It was introduced in 2001. The beak on this thing always makes me feel like, you know, the Terminator, come with me if you want to live. This thing to me is the most Terminator-ish airplane, even more so than up over my shoulder there. You know, the drones, the other drones, the Predator drone, that kind of thing. I think this thing to me looks pretty kind of cyber attack-ish. Now, there are 42 of these running around. We've lost some in crashes. It was also developed into the MQ-4C for the Triton, which is the Navy, and I'm going to talk to you about the difference because they appear the same, but there's actually a subtle difference between the two. This is called a high-altitude, long-endurance platform. HAIL is high-altitude, long-endurance platform. The U.S. Air Force plans to retire these en masse, in other words, completely, by 2027. Now, if you think about that, this thing it's only been around roughly about 20 years, and it is headed to the boneyard. There are some new leases on life, and there's some folks that are thinking about operating it, but for what was cutting-edge DARPA technology, this was as cutting-edge as you could get back in the early 2000s. It is now a relic of the past. Now, when I say that, I'm going to go ahead and go to my toast here, and that is the folks that operate these guys, they're unsung heroes, right? They're stuck in trailers, they're doing reconnaissance, they're doing the boring work, keeping the cameras on the target, or with the Predator drones or the Reapers. You do have some offensive capability, but you got to remember that these aircraft can stay on station for up to 20 hours. A lot of them, they're extremely high endurance. And you're flying, a lot of the equipment is loaded into Connex containers, and you're sitting in a Connex container somewhere in the middle of nowhere, maybe out at Creech or one of these other bases, and you don't get a lot of recognition. But the reality of the situation is, and I've talked about this before, when you look at what's happening, Ukraine is going to change everything as far as the employment of drones. You can see what Ukraine is doing with drones to level of basically what we call a force multiplier, right? They're leveling the playing field against a much bigger adversary with much more sophisticated weapons. They're actually striking Russian airfields. They're doing all kinds of things. And what happens is that forces the Russians to provide more air defense in the rear of their both in Ukraine, where the parts that they've invaded, and in Russia. And that's what I mean about a force multiplier. Where could those troops be? They could be on the front line fighting the Ukrainians, but they're tying down these anti-aircraft units and some of these other folks to defend these far-flung airfields with drones just like this. We just don't use them other than the Predator and the Reaper in that real offensive capacity. And honestly, the Predator and the Reaper in the environment that we're talking about, like Ukraine, they're too big. We're seeing Ukrainian drones being made out of cardboard now and other material that isn't as easy to see on radar. So, and they're cheap. So there's a lot of things happening, but these aircraft were the forerunner, and all the people that operated these, I talked about saving lives. I do that a lot. These folks saved lives, whether they recognized a troop concentration or a dangerous position, or in, as I said, the offensive drones that we have, they actually came in and provided air support. They saved lives, and they did it from sitting inside of one of these sweaty Connex containers, like I talked about, or stuck somewhere, which is not very desirable, maybe on a ship as an example. So if you are a drone operator in one of the services, thank you so much. We are going to recognize you with Boing! Boing! The guava pulp beverage. Let's see. This is Best Buy 23. Oh, 9.5. So we're like right on the money there. Only has 124 calories in it. It does have California Redemption Certificate. It doesn't have 12 million calories or crud all over it. I almost said something else that related to the hat that they had me on. But let's go ahead and get it open. Oh, nothing. There was nothing there. So if you're a drone operator, or you were involved in building them, or you were involved with DARPA in the development of a lot of this stuff early on, because this technology has built over the last 20 years kind of exponentially, I salute you. That is not offensive, but it is dead flat. I mean, that makes me nervous. It is so bad. Wow. It looks good, but looks can be deceiving. All right, we'll take one more mandatory sip. Kevin's laughing here. All right, we got one of the airplanes going by there, but the interesting thing about this aircraft is budget cuts nearly killed its development. It was in the early 90s, there was basically a shootout going between the RQ-3, which was the Dark Star, and the Global Hawk. Budget cuts meant that only one aircraft could go forward. The Global Hawk won that. Dark Star kind of didn't make it. The reason for that was the desperate need for surveillance, above our forces that were tied down in Iraq and Afghanistan, and reconnaissance. And these things could stay on station a long time. Remember, they not only would provide video, but they can eavesdrop and do things. So they get a whole bunch of reconnaissance information, and then they can come back. Now, the problem with cost overruns was so bad that when they fielded these, the Air Force nearly killed the program because the operating costs were so high. They are still, and you can argue with me in the comments section, the flight operation costs of this are still higher than the U-2, which is ultimately what will lead to the demise of this program. They've never been able to get the flight ops costs down to the point of the manned platform, and that's part of the problem. The only limiting factor and what helps this is they don't have enough of the manned platforms to be able to field them everywhere they want, and these aircraft kind of fill the gap. Now, where are they headed is probably into some environmental use and some overwatch in that area. NATO, South Korea, and Japan operate them, as well as NASA. One of these has the distinction in 2019 of being shot down by the Iranians. It was flamed by the Iranians because they claimed it was in its airspace, a claim that the United States hotly disputes. Now, think about that. They shot this down. There was no loss of life in this. So we lost the reconnaissance aircraft, but we didn't lose any people or had them captured. And that is the essence of why these aircraft operate in the battle spaces that they do. Potential operators are Australia, Canada over the Arctic, which makes perfect sense. New Zealand and India may eventually come into the global hawk fray. One of the things the Europeans played around with it doesn't have, and NATO didn't like, the European countries have a collision avoidance system that they want in all of their aircraft. This aircraft didn't have that, and that's one thing that, Germany has been kicked around as a potential operator over the years. The Germans probably will not operate it as part of NATO because of the fact that it doesn't have a collision avoidance system. Now, if you want to capitalize on Northrop Grumman, and really Grumman, you can't get any more ironworks than the F6F, the Hellcat. Did you ever build any of these? No? Kevin's shaking his head. This is, and you can't see it, maybe you can see on the back, but this is a balsa wood kit. You built these and then you stretched the paper over them and you got the dope and you put the dope on to get everything rigid. These are hard to build. These are really hard to build, but if you go ahead and click on the link for one of these, Jason will happily take you through the 20-step learning process once you buy one of these online that will help you build this piece. I am kidding. Jason will not do that because he's at home having a coronary at the moment. But if you want one of those, click on the link. We'll happily mail it out to you. Now, if you came across us on YouTube and you like nothing but straightforward, kind of low production, and I say low production, video where we talk about military aircraft, that's all we do. Go ahead and give us a subscription. We can really use your subscription. I was looking at our videos. We have like 170 or 180 of them now. There's a ton of stuff in there you can look at and keep yourself busy for a long time. There's over 600 videos on our YouTube channel, so have at it. There's all kinds of stuff on it. If you came across us on Facebook, we would love a like and a comment. Again, we love your comments. That's how we end up with viewer suggestions and what we've been doing here. And lastly, we cannot do all of this without your donations. So there's a donation link there. If you will click on that, send us a few shekels, we would be very grateful for it. And that's how we keep this museum going. So we appreciate any donations that you might be able to give us. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Thanks so much for visiting us. Have a great day.
3, 2, 1, end of test. King with a go.